3 days later with the MacBook Pro 14-inch base model. Is this machine worth the money? And how does it compare to the amazing MacBook Air M1? Let's talk about it. How's it going, y'all? It is Ben, Aqua. So after 3 days, I am completely in love with this MacBook Pro 14-inch. It is completely blowing everything out of the park in terms of performance, in terms of display. So be sure to smash the like button below and subscribe because I'm gonna be doing a lot more videos about this machine. And also add me on Twitter at B3NAQUA because I'm posting a lot of kind of behind the scenes and fun pictures and stuff like that. My last video that you might have seen on my channel, if you haven't, I will link below. But that video was actually edited on the MacBook Pro 14-inch right here in Final Cut Pro. And let me tell you, the performance was absolutely stunning. My MacBook Air M1 has 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is the same amount of RAM as on the MacBook Pro 14-inch. But because the chip is updated to the M1 Pro chip on the base model 14-inch, the performance was noticeably better. And I don't know if it was because ProMotion, like just scrolling around and this and that on the display just seems much smoother in general compared to the experience on the MacBook Air M1, which is still really good. But in Final Cut Pro, when I was just like, you know, going around the timeline, scrolling around this and that, there was almost no stutter whatsoever. Actually, I didn't notice a single bit of stuttering. My preview screen in Final Cut Pro is set to better quality, not better performance, which means I'm seeing the raw 4K footage that I'm shooting with my Sony a7C in Final Cut Pro in real time when I'm scrubbing around and stuff like that. There's no stuttering. So it's handling really high quality 4K footage like butter. I don't know why that took so long to open Final Cut Pro there. It's validating all kinds of audio units. And this is kind of a weird issue that I've noticed. And this is not so much with this machine, but I think it's a Monterey/Final Cut Pro issue. So it's actually taking several seconds to open each project, and it goes through each event and does this kind of loading spinny ball of death kind of thing, like the beach ball. This has been happening since I loaded Monterey onto both of these machines. Like the same thing happened on my MacBook Air M1, where before Final Cut Pro was opening instantly. It's taking its sweet time right now, and I'm trying to demonstrate how fast this computer is, but that's usually how these things work apparently. Hashtag YouTube life. There we go. It's so fast. It's insanely fast. Everything is completely instant, and I have no problems with Final Cut Pro other than the initial loading of the app, which is driving me kind of crazy. And I haven't heard anyone else talking about that. So if you have witnessed that really slow loading Final Cut Pro issue since you upgraded to Monterey on your Mac, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, Final Cut Pro is one of the main reasons why I got this 14-inch MacBook Pro to begin with. And this machine has not let me down one bit. It's just completely smooth. Where I have noticed the biggest differences in terms of Final Cut is not so much the scrubbing around kind of experience, because it's really fast on both of these machines, maybe slightly faster on the MacBook Pro, but the exporting is where the MacBook Pro is actually noticeably faster than the MacBook Air. For example, I had a project that was about 11 minutes long. I had the same project loaded up on both of these machines. I exported both of them at the same exact settings, and the MacBook Pro exported that video in about 5 minutes, where the MacBook Air rendered that same video in about 6 minutes. Like for some people, that will be a huge deal to have really quick render times if you have like a project that you need to get out ASAP to a client or something like that. I would definitely recommend getting the MacBook Pro just for the better performance overall. But if that doesn't really matter to you and you just really want a better performance, you know, kind of system when you're just scrubbing around, you don't want to see any lag and that kind of stuff, either one of these machines will do that for you, even the MacBook Air. But I would recommend if you go for the MacBook Air, get 16 gigabytes, 100%. But what's cool about the 14-inch and also the 16-inch new MacBook Pros is you can upgrade the RAM to up to 64 gigabytes. And I personally haven't really seen the need for that, especially with how well this 14-inch has handled Final Cut Pro. Like this base model is a complete dream machine for me. So that's Final Cut Pro. And my other main usage for my Macs in general is music production. So if you haven't checked out my music, search for Ben Aqua on Spotify and Apple Music, and you'll find all my stuff there. I highly appreciate all of your streams, all of your shares and stuff like that. But yeah, performance on this MacBook Pro 14-inch has been awesome with Ableton Live as well. And this is a version of Ableton that actually isn't even optimized for the M1 chip. And you know what's actually kind of surprised me the most about the 14-inch Pro is how good the internal speakers are on this machine. So let's just give you a little example now. My computer just started running out of battery, so I'm gonna plug it in using MagSafe, which is another awesome feature on here that I freaking love. But yeah, for laptop speakers, these are actually quite awesome compared to the MacBook Air M1. So I'm gonna open up that same project. This is the MacBook Pro 14-inch. And this is the MacBook Air M1. So you may have been able to hear that the MacBook Pro is a lot fuller, it's a lot deeper in terms of bass, and it makes the MacBook Air in comparison just kind of sound hollow and kind of tinny, like there's almost no bass coming out. And when it comes to general music production in Ableton Live, on the MacBook Pro, it honestly does not feel super different from the MacBook Air M1. I think the only main difference that I would notice is when I'm exporting my file out, like this song is a 3 minutes and 35 seconds or something like that song. The MacBook Pro rendered this song out in about 63 seconds, I believe, and then the MacBook Air rendered it out in like 75 seconds or something. So the MacBook Pro was definitely faster. It was a noticeable difference. But again, like, you know, 10 seconds extra on the MacBook Air, it's not the end of the world, and the MacBook Air is half the price of the MacBook Pro. So if you're on more of a budget, the MacBook Air is 100% an awesome laptop that I would recommend to most people, even people that are shooting videos and editing videos, making music, etc. So another major difference between the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro is this display. And this is a 120 Hertz variable refresh rate display on the MacBook Pro, and the brightness is much brighter on the MacBook Pro versus the MacBook Air. Especially when you're watching HDR video, you see a dramatic difference between these two machines. So it might be kind of hard to tell in this video, but the HDR looks so much better on the MacBook Pro versus the MacBook Air. So if you're watching a lot of HDR content, 100% the MacBook Pro is like absolutely bonkers. It's the most beautiful display I've seen on a MacBook Pro. It's basically like a small version of Apple's fancy $5,000 XDR display, except in this cute 14-inch form factor. Like the blacks get super inky black on the MacBook Pro screen. It's just a beautiful experience watching movies and videos and stuff. Where on the MacBook Air, it's still really beautiful. Like they both have a P3 wide color gamut. Colors look amazing on both of these machines. But when you're looking at like deep black areas on the screens, the MacBook Air looks almost grayish. It's like almost like a purple gray kind of thing, where the MacBook Pro looks like pure black. It is absolutely stunning. And if you want a better display, 100% the MacBook Pro is a definite upgrade over the MacBook Air. But when you're watching SDR content, they actually look quite similar, where the MacBook Pro looks a little bit better, a little bit brighter than the MacBook Air. But in terms of sharpness and stuff, they actually look identical. It's more just kind of a brightness thing, especially with HDR content. Another thing I am loving about the MacBook Pro is I don't have to resort back to dongle life at all on this machine. I think the only time when I would need a dongle is to convert a USB-A to USB-C kind of situation. But I am loving that there's HDMI over here. There's a card reader. Oh my gosh, y'all, the card reader. I almost had a single tear stream down my face the first time I put an SD card into the new MacBook Pro. There's also 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports. There's one on the right side, and then there's 2 over here, as well as a really high quality headphone jack. And I'm gonna talk about the headphone jack in another video because I think it's actually worth its own video. It's beautiful. And in terms of ports, MagSafe has also been really awesome. It feels more like a throwback kind of thing. Like this reminds me of MagSafe from my 2015 MacBook Pro. And that's a really good segue, good job, Ben, into my next topic, which is the overall design and build quality of this MacBook Pro, where it's, you know, kind of more of a squared off design, but it does have some nice curves around here. It's definitely thicker, it's definitely bulkier than the MacBook Air. The performance and the solid kind of quality of this MacBook Pro, it feels like another level than the MacBook Air. Actually, the MacBook Air, even though it's a very robust machine, compared to the MacBook Pro, this MacBook Air actually feels kind of brittle now. It's really strange how Apple just like releases this new stuff and then all of a sudden your older stuff just seems like it's just gonna like break in half when you like sneeze. So yeah, there is a little bit more weight and thickness on the MacBook Pro. It's not a deal breaker for me though, because it's actually still extremely thin and pretty lightweight considering the performance and, you know, the speakers and the battery and all the internals, like computing all this stuff for us. Like, it's kind of insane that that much power can exist in such a relatively tiny shell. The only thing I might want to upgrade in this machine is not so much the performance, because the performance is really amazing on this base model MacBook Pro, and I think this is plenty of performance for, you know, light users to even very kind of heavy video editors and stuff. I'm not shooting in 8K or any of that kind of stuff, but this is plenty, even at the base model, of performance for me. But the base model only comes with 512 gigabytes. I do kind of miss having 1 terabyte of storage on my MacBook Air, so I may break my own rule here and actually get the slightly beefed up model of the 14-inch MacBook Pro, which has 1 terabyte of storage, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and it also has a bumped up 10-core CPU from the 8-core CPU on this base model. But to sum all of this raw rambling up, this base model MacBook Pro 14-inch is completely awesome. It's absolutely bonkers. Amazing display, really awesome speakers, weirdly. The build quality is awesome. It's thicker, but it's not like overly thick where I'm just kind of like, I don't want to use this at all. It's still pretty lightweight and pretty easy to carry around and that kind of stuff. This display alone, I think, is worth like $1,000. I wish Apple would just release this display as like a standalone. I think they would sell the bananas out of that. And I really haven't had almost any issues with this computer other than Final Cut opening kind of slowly. So again, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe down below, because I'm going to be doing a lot more kind of more in-depth but specific videos about a lot of the features that I love. And here's a little spicy nugget for you. I have a Discord channel that I would love for you to join. The link for that is in the description below. We're just chilling and talking about Apple and tech and random memes and stuff, so join that down below. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.